have video now, so sorry about that. It was just one of those technical issues. I had to log off and log back on.
It happens.
Yeah. I know, man.
Yeah.
Made me sweat a little bit. Like, no. Now we're 20 minutes late, so I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, guys.
Yeah, it's well. We're all in at the same time. It's just a technical bits of it. So. Barbecue is not in. Otherwise, Saido, can you send a message out there to say it's all up and running now?
All right, okay. Thanks.
Because as it is, we have only about 5 attendees compared to where we were.
And they'll come back.
I think they should also try to access it through the link than their apps. I don't know why it's creating that technical problem.
Yeah.
Well done, guys.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Leslie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, now, yeah, finally. That was, yeah. Hey, Dr. Freeman, how are you?
Yeah.
Inside you.
My chief, how are you?
Good, how are you? Claudine?
Hello,
how are you?
Very good, very good. How is Durban treating you?
Oh, it's cold. We are having winter at the moment. You know,
yeah.
It's really winter time and it's so cold this side. Plus
imagine.
COVID. But otherwise we're doing fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Lamin.
Yes.
How are you, sir?
Leslie, do we all have to be on videos?
No, you don't have to.
Good.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Good stuff.
With your obrigado.
Yeah.
One question. If I type my question to you.
How are you?
I'm good.
Very good, very good. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you, sir.
I was once in your country, Cape Verde, beautiful place. Before you were there, though. Yeah.
Where was that?
Probably 2009, 2010, somewhere.
Yeah, I was here.
You were there?
Yeah. I've been here for 21 years.
Oh, my goodness. I never knew that.
That's a long time.
We'll take this offline. Let's take it offline.
All right. So we have 2 panelists and the moderator. So
hearing me, but I'm not hearing anyone.
I can hear you, Jonathan Bobamara. Look, I can hear you. You guys raise your volume up a little bit.
Les, I can't hear anyone.
We can hear you.
But we can hear you clearly.
Oh, really?
Okay. Well, not so very loud, but
okay. Do we
over
start
distance,
now?
yeah?
Can see you even.
Yeah. What happened to Swafiatu and Mohammed Masakor?
Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you. I can see you. I can hear you.
Hello, Les.
Yes.
Roland Wolf.
So
Kring you the champ, so.
Super Les, do we go now? I'm not hearing.
Yeah, let's go. I think we can take
it.
Super Les. I don't know if I'm muted.
Leslie, one quick question. This is the second link. This is the second link. Is this the link that was disseminated publicly, or do we have to disseminate this all over again?
Oh no, they can use the old one as well.
Also, the old one will connect to this. It's the same.
Absolutely.
But you still need to use the password.
Good.
Whatever case, as long as you have the link.
Is it the same password?
Well, it's there, 374876.
It's the same password I used, same meeting ID.
But the problem I
Is
detected.
anyone hearing me? Please, could you just give me a thumbs up if you're hearing me?
Because my fear is that only a
I
few
can
of us
hear you.
Yes, Sergio, you're right. The problem I detected is if you try to access it through, I was not able to do it unless I have to go through the link for my email. So I don't know if there's a technical thing there.
Okay, guys. I can hear.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you, Jonathan Bobama, and we should be good to go.
Leslie, I'm not hearing anyone.
I'm going to go live on
Apart from
Facebook now.
Alassane.
So, yeah, can you hear me? Jonathan Bobama, can you hear me?
Hello.
Take these headphones off. I would suggest you don't use the headphones.
Leslie, could everyone hear me? So
take the headphones off.
We can hear you. We can hear you, Jonathan. Yeah.
Could anyone hear me now?
Yes, yes. We can even see you.
Unplug it and completely take the headphones off. Can you hear us?
Okay, for some reason, I can't hear anyone. I don't know what's going on. But I just want to know if we can start now, because I think we've kept the panelists waiting for a while. So if someone could text me, let's start.
We have all the panelists.
Good. All right, thank you very much, everyone, for taking the patience. Thank you very much. Welcome to Grand Radio, Community Matters. And here, what we do, we discuss issues relating to how we could contribute in one way or the other to national development in Sierra Leone. But it's not limited to Sierra Leone, particularly Sierra Leone, but generally to Africa. And today, we want to deal or have a conversation around civic responsibility and how we could empower, inspire, and inform the people of Sierra Leone as to what could be done as an individual to contribute towards national development. Many a time in Sierra Leone, we just think, oh, the government should be doing everything. Oh, it's always the government or this. But today we want to see how best we could identify and address what an individual as a Sierra Leonean could do to help national development. So without much ado, I'm going to introduce the moderator, who is none other than a person I've known over the past maybe 30, going to 40 years. And he's none other than Dr. Abdulrahman Lamine, who works for UNESCO. He's a social scientist, and he at present works in Paris, and he's worked on all the continents, really and truly. He's been very productive, very progressive, and he works in sectors across geographic regions to coordinate national and regional interventions of exceptional quality and profile. He's been a leader for a while. He went to, obviously studied in Frobe College. So he has a national understanding of what the dynamics of the Sierra Leone is. So he's not a person who didn't understand. He studied in different districts of the country. So he knows what some of the challenges are, what some of the opportunities are, and what some of the threats are. So I do not want to do too much. I do not want to say too much about Dr. Lamine. However, he's been a senior lecturer in South Africa in international relations at the University of Witwatersrand. So South Africa, he taught courses at both undergraduate and postgraduate level. So I think today we have a privilege of having such panelists. I'll leave him to introduce the panelists. That's not my job. But what I want to say is we have a moderator who has an understanding of Africa. He's worked in Kenya, he's worked in Ghana. So he's seen what the African problem is, let alone the Sierra Leonean problem. So I just hope and pray that, yes, we get a full understanding of what our rights, but also our responsibilities are as a citizen of Sierra Leone. So I'll hand over now, humbly, to none other but my Kotor. He's my Boskul Kotor, and I'm not ashamed of that, to Dr. Abdul Rahman Lamin.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bob Amara, for those kind remarks. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may be around the world. Welcome to this conversation. And I'd first like to take this opportunity to thank Grand Sierra Leone for inviting me to moderate today's discussion. Our topic for today is civic responsibility in Sierra Leone, a topic that is not only relevant, but timely, as our country navigates a very difficult and indeed challenging path towards national unity and peaceful social cohesion. At the heart of today's discussion, therefore, is the central question that we will be interrogating. What are our responsibilities as citizens in ensuring that we build a democratic, peaceful, and inclusive Sierra Leone where all who live in it can explore their full potentials? How do we, as citizens, exercise those responsibilities and do so in a civic manner to ensure that we promote tolerance for one another, respect for diversity, and ultimately entrench a culture of peace? What strategies do we need in place to ensure that we forge and strengthen a relationship between the state and its citizens that is based on respect for the rule of law, so that we ultimately create the Sierra Leone that we all imagine and want? To be clear, peace is not the absence of war, as has been famously noted by historic figures, including the late Nelson Mandela or Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. By definition, a culture of peace presupposes a set of values, principles, attitudes, and behavior underpinned by respect for others, tolerance of opposing views, and preference for nonviolent resolution of disputes and conflicts. Peace, for that matter, a culture of peace, therefore, is not a condition or an event, but rather a way of life that we must all live every day. To build an inclusive and peaceful society requires uprooting the structural underpinnings of violence, which includes, among others, inequalities, politicization of ethnic and regional identities, and factionalism, to name a few, or some of the factors which unfortunately leave violence as an option for citizens. If you don't address those structural problems, you are likely to create a situation where people may resort to violence. Given this unfortunate reality, it behooves us at this critical juncture in our history to begin to take collective steps that are designed to build bridges across our divides in our society by strengthening our common bonds of solidarity and work towards building national consensus around the issues that unite us as a people. To achieve that collective objective of creating and building a harmonious society, we must have a national conversation about citizenship and the rights and responsibilities that go along with it. It is thus within this broad context that today's discussion is situated. And once again, let me thank the organizers, Grand Sierra Leone, for inviting me to moderate this distinguished group of panelists. And I would like to thank all panelists who I will introduce momentarily for taking time off their respective busy schedules to be with us today to help us unpack many of these issues. The discussion, of course, will be guided by a set of questions that I throw out, and I will allow the panelists to reflect on them as we go along. But before I get to those questions, allow me to now present to you our panelists who will help us navigate these issues over the next 9 minutes or so. Our first panelist is Dr. Alito Freeman. Dr. Freeman is one of the founders of the Civil Society Movement Sierra Leone and the Civil Defense Unit Sierra Leone. He served as national coordinator for both organizations and played a critical role during the Civil War. Dr. Freeman currently resides in the UK and is a teacher. Dr. Freeman, you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, moderator.
The next panelist is Dr. Claudine Hingston. Dr. Hingston was born and bred in Sierra Leone. She studied in Sierra Leone and before she left for the UK in 2004. Prior to leaving for the UK, she was senior information officer at the Ministry of Information Broadcasting and also lectured part-time at Frobe College. Dr. Hingston is currently based in KwaZulu-Natal, where she finished her PhD, Gender Studies, and is currently at the Mankosa Honoris University in Durban, South Africa, where she works at the Center for Women Leadership in Africa. Dr. Hingston, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is Madam Safiatou Tunis, who is a social mobilizer at the Kipomoy Futa Incorporated. Madam Tunis was an English tutor in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for some time before returning home in the early 2000s. She is highly involved in national development through empowering of parents and communities. Madam Tunis, you are most welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. And last but by no means least is Mr. Mohammed Suleiman Massakoy, who is a communication specialist. He has been editor of some of the leading newspapers in Sierra Leone, including Exclusive, New Storm, and New Vision. He was public relations officer at Africell Limited, one of the leading telecommunications outfits in the country. Until his latest appointment, he was liaison and communications officer with Wellthink Life, and he is currently media relations advisor and in the outreach coordination unit in the Ministry of Information and Communication. Mr. Massakoy, you are most welcome. I don't think that he has joined us yet, but that's Mr. Massakoy. When he
he was having some difficulties connecting.
Okay, so thank you very much and welcome to the conversation. What I'd like to do at the outset is to invite each of you to give us a 3-minute summary of what your understanding of civic responsibility is in the Sierra Leonean context. And in doing so, I would appreciate if you could paint a picture of the state of affairs as you see it today in the country. Maybe I should start with Madam Safiatou, since you're on the ground in Sierra Leone. Why don't we start the ball rolling with you? 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, civic responsibility, as I see it in Sierra Leone, I would say it is non-existent as at now, because as a citizen or as citizens, many of us don't know what our responsibilities are to ourselves, to the states, or our communities. We are having a lot of difficulties because within ourselves, we've already allowed or we are made to believe that we don't have responsibilities to the states except when it comes to the time of voting. From my observation within our communities, many a times things go wrong. We refuse to take action because we are waiting for the stakeholders or those who are leading us to come and clean up the mess in our communities. So I really think that as at now, in my view, we as citizens are not doing our duties or as how we should do. We're not doing that. We are rather trying to shift the blame somewhere else. You know, for example, when we are told by the Freetown City Council that we should not throw trash in certain parts of the city, we do that. We throw the trash on the streets, nobody picks it up. We leave it now. A few days ago when it rained, a lot of places are flooded. You know, when they tell us do not put a structure in certain areas where it is risky for your life, for you and your family, we go and actually put a structure there. And when it rains, you know, we have mudslides and all of these things. So I think as citizens, we need to go back. Maybe we have to unlearn some of the negative things we have had within the country, maybe from the war or some of the habits we have inculcated so far. We need to unlearn those things and go back to the roots and start all over. I think I'll stop there for now. I hope that makes sense to you all.
Okay, thank you very, very much. I think you have gotten us off to a very good start. It's a very profound commentary on our society when you make the point that civic responsibility actually is non-existent. And I think it should be a cause for worry. As citizens, we claim our rights, which are entrenched in our constitution and laws, but we also know that with rights goes responsibilities, and you are saying from what you see, and you are able to illustrate that with a few examples of how citizens behave when it comes to cleaning the environment, when it comes to maintaining what we need to do to achieve a healthy environment. Citizens just do it. And you go on to say that we perhaps need to unlearn some of the negative things that we have learned over the years. So that is very, very good. So let me move the conversation further and go to Dr. Hingston in South Africa. South Africa is a very vibrant society. I happen to have spent part of my career living and working in South Africa. People clamor for their rights, but there are also responsibilities. But of course, today's conversation is on Sierra Leone. But I would like you in, giving us your understanding of what civic responsibility is, situate it maybe in a broader context, focusing on Sierra Leone, but perhaps, sharing a little bit of experience of what you see, in Sierra Leone and how that resonates with what you see from where you sit in South Africa.
Good evening, everybody. I think first of all, we need to know that as citizens, we have our civic duties and our civic responsibilities. Because civic duties in itself is that we need to obey the rule of the law and of the land. We need to abide by the Constitution. So if we're talking about the Sierra Leone context, we need to abide by the Constitution of Sierra Leone and the rules of the land. In terms of our civic responsibilities, there are things like voting. We also need to report if there is a crime, if there are things like suspicious behavior. We need to respect diversity, be tolerant, and be And we should also not involve in things like tribalism, favor someone because you are from the same ethnic group, or favor someone because you are from the same religious group, various things like that. But I think people basically in Sierra Leone do not understand the context of civic duties. It's basically everything it's the government should do. It's basically, they see themselves, or we see ourselves basically, because I'm also a Sierra Leonean, as us against the government. It's like the government does their thing, we do ours, and it should be, like a harmony. We should work together to do things. I remember last year when I was in Sierra Leone, I was working with my niece and she threw a banana peel in the drainage, and I took mine and put it in my bag. And I said, when I get home, I will put it in the bin. And she looked at me, I'm like, ha, why? Why do you need to take it all the way home? Why don't you throw it in the bin, in the drains? Because look at so many things. I'm like, but if you throw it there, then it's going to cause drainage, as Safia to say just now. And then when the rain comes, it's going to be a big problem. So better take it home. And she looked at me and said, it's government's responsibility. So I think as Sierra Leoneans at times we have that mindset that everything is the government should do for us. And we only engage when it's time to vote or issues like that. But most of the time, we tend to turn a blind eye and say, this is not my business, that is government business. So I think these are the issues that we need to talk about. And I've also seen that happening in South Africa. There are so many things, as our moderator said just now, South Africa is a land of protest. People know their rights, they protest a lot, but it also comes with responsibilities. I can remember some time back, people were protesting about the lack of toilets, and they were saying that government did not build the toilets for them. And I kept thinking to myself, but wait here, you could actually build something for yourself which you can use, rather than say that the government has to do everything. So I think within the African context, we tend to want governments to do everything. I'm not saying government does not have a right. The state does not have a right to do things for its citizen. And as I said, it should be a mutual engagement. It should be a two-way process. So that's how I see civic duties and civic responsibilities.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hinkstein. Thank you for making a distinction between civic duties and responsibilities. They may be related, but you're clearly saying there is a distinction. However, they are both essential when it comes to exercising citizenship. I think you reinforced the point that was made by Madame Tunis when she said, and which you confirmed also with examples, that oftentimes we leave everything to government. If it's everybody's business, it's not my business, it's the government's business. We expect government to do it, but we don't want to play our own part. And I think you also help us in broadening the context and saying that this is not necessarily a Sierra Leonean problem per se, it's something, as you've illustrated in South Africa where you sit, it's also the case. So thank you very much for that. Let me move on to Dr. Freeman. Dr. Freeman, it's very nice to have you on. It's good to see you after so many years. Alito, you've come a long way in the struggle. And as I mentioned in the introduction, he was one of the leading members of the civil society movement during the difficult years of war. So this conversation is not new to you. And you sit in the UK now, but I know you follow events very closely in Sierra Leone. So take us through in just 3 minutes what your understanding of civic responsibilities are in the Sierra Leonean context, and doing so, how would you appraise the current situation? Alita, thank you.
Oh, thanks so much, Mr. Moderator. And before I start, I think there is this famous quote which is normally overused by the late John F. Kennedy, which says, ask not what your country can do for you, but rather ask what you can do for your country. I think that sums it up in terms of when we talk about civic responsibility, because it is about what each and every one of us contributing to the public good. And I think for me, the attention there is each and every one of us. And when I looked at this topic and the different segments into it, And the other speakers have said it should be mutually reinforcing, because I would have to be very controversial here, because there are times whenever we are talking about civic responsibility, there's a tendency for us to just like tilt it towards more the individuals and the people themselves. And I think somebody's in the background. We need to, I think the funny thing here is that before you become a state actor, in a way, you're also an individual. I'm just swimming around it. But then generally for me, it is about how we all contribute to that public good. And so the understanding there, what is that public good? So how can we make ourselves active citizens? In the case of Sierra Leone, as people are mentioning, what can you do? It starts from the individual level. I look at it from the individual, the community, and that national level, and something which we're going to talk about, all put together, which would help to determine what is seen as the national mindset of a country. But then, when we also talk about it, it brings into focus the democratic credentials of the state. I want to look at it from that angle. What are the democratic credentials in terms of good governance? So we see the intertwine of it here, because it's like a two-way traffic. We talk about the rulers and the ruled, not just the people down there. What it means to live democracy, what are our social and political responsibilities? Now, how do we participate and engage? Like what people are saying, there's something about apathy. Most of the time we think, oh, well, now their own business, that's not to be. How do we engage in decision-making processes, even at community level? To an extent, I think much progress, if I want to bring the Sierra Leone context, much progress has been made towards the aspect of participation and engagement at community level, especially so with the proliferation of NGOs, bringing the people together. But also it's about our responsibility in promoting the rule of law, which most people have said. And most importantly, most people have been talking about what I see as the social decorum and etiquette. And somebody was talking about online. The mindsets here for me is what is very important as a citizen and also responding to your civic responsibility. So for me, like I said, it is each and every one of us, including the state actors themselves, who I think also are individuals in one way or the other, and perhaps occupying double hats. So it's, and within the Sierra Leone context also, there are so many barriers that would have hampered that understanding of civic education or civic responsibility. Those things which, of course, we would unpack here. Why do we think, I would want to just round it up in the form of question. Why do we think people are not showing interest to issues that they be showing interest to? Rightly so. There's so much we can talk about the behavior. There's so much we can talk about the attitude and the perception of people when we want to focus it on that angle. But I would also just try, just as an introduction, to say it is that contribution from each and every one of us towards public good, towards the public good, about our awareness, civic awareness, about our rights. And like people have just said, it's not just about your own rights, but then what are your responsibilities? And there are so many wonderful examples. When you look at some of the things also that we might want to talk about, the cultural mindset. And by the end of this day, some of us want to profile that perhaps what we need is a cultural renewal. We're all guilty of it. What makes you, when that's very common, when standing in the queue, what is it that in a bank, you go into the bank in the morning? It's part of civic education because it's part of social etiquette. What is it that when you think that you are in the back of the queue, you think that, oh, you want to jump and move right ahead because perhaps it's of your influence and so on. Those tendencies, those mindsets, all put together help to define the national psyche of a country. And when that is not right, that perhaps is what we see from the first speaker. And it's really disheartening. And that's a fact to say civic responsibility to an extent is zero. But I would not want to just put it on the one side. I think it is an indictment of everybody, including the individuals and including the state actors themselves. But we'll come to a quick one. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Freeman. I think you're preparing us for that conversation, moving the conversation forward. We're definitely going to deal with that because we cannot talk about citizenship in a vacuum. We cannot talk about citizenship without talking about state, But you make very good points. You talk about, how do we contribute to the public good? What is that public good? Do we agree on it? What are democratic credentials of the state? When we talk about the mindset of citizens, we must also ask the question, why? Why do citizens have that mindset? So thank you very much. And of course, you put it in a global context. The famous saying by John F. Kennedy, it's not what your country can do for you, but what you do for your country. So in many respects, this conversation is not just a localized one that is focused on Sierra Leone, but it's one that has significant global resonance. So thank you very much for doing that. I don't know if Mr. Masakwe has joined us. I would like to give him the floor. But if he hasn't, I would want to move to the segment. But before I do so, may I encourage our participants who are joining us online from around the world to please use the chat box to ask questions and state opinions. We want this to be very interactive. I think this is, beginning of a series of conversation that Grand Sierra Leone is seeking to embark on. So the more perspectives that we have, I think the better for us. So please feel free to go to the chat box, ask your questions and state your opinions, and then we will take it from there. Is Masako with us? Okay, all right. Okay, he's not with us, but then let's move on. Now there were. I want to engage the panelists in this second segment to probe a little bit further this question of the mindset, and I think it cut across all of the interventions. Everybody kept talking about citizens seem to have a particular mindset that they do not necessarily have to exercise their own responsibilities. The government has to do it. Sophia talked about unlearning the lessons of the past. And I think Sierra Leone, having gone through the experience that we have, which we don't need a description, I think, all of us on this forum know that we've gone through very difficult years of conflict. Fortunately, we got out of that. And I think one of the unique things about every country that is seeking to build peace in the aftermath of a violent conflict, like in the way that we did, is to go back and look at, what precipitated that conflict. To put it in proverbial terms, where did the rain start beating us? And how do we take steps to ensure that we begin to address those issues that in the first place precipitated the situation we find ourselves in. So with that, let me throw out this question. What, in your view, is responsible for the high level of tolerance in our public discourse, and what responsibility we as citizens have to ensure that we reverse that trend, especially given the fact that we know that we have so much in common, and very little that really divides us. And I think we need to situate that in the context where we've come from and where we need to go. As we seek to build peace, as we seek to bring our people together to unite the country, where did we go wrong? Or what is it that we haven't done that has led to the state of polarization that we have today? Maybe I go back to you, Safiatu. You want to
Yes, sir.
take the lead?
Yeah. For me, I am going to be very, very raw to say
we like that. We like that.
We have lost We have lost our moral grounds in this country. We have lost, I don't even want to say spiritually, but I think we have gone so low, in my view, that we don't even want to protect each other. Why am I saying this? From traveling and observing other countries, because they say charity begins at home. When you go to other countries, in the first place, we have a huge a group of youths in this country who are not doing anything. They are idle. They wait around vehicles for people to pass by and ask them for change. Okay, we have those kind of people in this country. We don't have that sense of worthiness wherein a young man or woman will wake up in the morning and go fend for themselves. It should have started from the beginning. The state should have made it mandatory for each and every one of us to go into some kind of service right out of school. I've seen that happen in Asia. More especially, I saw, I have some friends who are Koreans, South Koreans. I don't care how high you go, you have to go do 2 years service. You have to go. The same thing happens in Nigeria. They have youth service. People go, it's mandatory for both boys and girls, for both young men and women to go, because these are all disciplines we have to learn from the beginning. So when you grow into that responsible human being, that responsible citizen, you will make your own contribution without anybody telling you what to do, because you already have the discipline. We don't have it in Syria. We do. And for some of us as parents, from the war to now, we have not been able to actually raise our children the way we are supposed to. We have not been able. I cannot raise my children the way I was raised up, because my dad was very, very strict. He was a hard man. But there were certain values, moral values that I am sharing with my children, that I'm enforcing that they should learn, for them to be able to contribute to society in a way that will be to them and communities. Many of us we don't have that in the world. I don't know where our moral values have gone, but it is at a low point. Because I work with communities, the NGOs, but what is also teaching is to actually teach them what their responsibilities or duties are, so the state and themselves, to the communities, and how they should. For me, I always say we are powerful as citizens in this country. We are powerful if we know our duties and responsibilities. We are powerful. I in Egypt, because they are 50% on the bed. They all brought the government down. 50 added the bread, the people. I'm saying we should come out there. How powerful citizens are supposed to be. But because we are saying, you youth and your spirit. How's that fun?
Thank you very much, Safiatu. Your line was breaking a bit, so I couldn't hear most of what you said.
Was it?
End. But in any case, yes, it was. But in any case,
what I was saying.
Yeah, now I can hear you better.
Yeah.
But it's okay. I got the gist of what you were saying. No, it's okay. It's okay. I'll come back to you. I got the
Okay,
gist
yeah.
of what you were saying. I think the main point you were making is we've lost our moral ground in Sierra Leone. You gave experiences of what you had seen in other parts of the world, the national service, and all of that, where we're able to build in the values that were needed. You put it also in generational terms. I mean, the way you were raised by your parents is not the way kids are raised today in the current generation. So we got that. Let me move on to Dr. Freeman. But before I do so, there is a comment. Please keep your comments coming. Very interesting one. I'm going to read one here from Eugene Cole, which says, I think it is good for us as a people to agree on who we are, what we stand for, what we are aiming to achieve, and then we can talk about our individual roles, rights, and responsibilities. It is good to talk about principles, but what are they guiding us to achieve? Don't you think it is a bit vague to just talk about rights and responsibilities without clear understanding towards what? Alito, let me throw that to you in light of the question I phrased earlier on about what has gone wrong. Where did they start beating us? Where did we get it so wrong? Why have we become so intolerant? And Mr. Cole's question seemed to be saying, if we're talking about all these rights and responsibilities and principles, what are they guiding us towards? So let me throw that out to you and allow you to reflect on that a little bit.
Yeah, I think how did it go wrong, and where as a nation, where have we all gone wrong? Somebody talking, I think, the first speaker talk about the home. If we want to talk about what level do we start to inculcate discipline into the minds of our children, it goes without saying that the home is the very first important level, because that is where it should start. But talking about where did it go all wrong, it's when you look at the country, I think we have to come back into this again. And where, of course, with the recent figure, I think it talks about the literacy rate, which is a very big improvement now. Just about 43% of the population age 15 and above can even write very simple statements. And we then put that together in the context of the home. The home that is trapped in an environment of poverty. A home that is trapped in an environment in which there is no incentive, at least, to send your child to school. A home that is trapped in an environment, in fact, in which the facilities are not there. And yes, where did it all go wrong? Because if we look at it from that angle and we say, yes, because being a teacher in the provinces, I remember when I was in the north, you begin to see parents struggling to send their children to school. And you look at the way girls, in fact, were used. They were the ones that, in fact, even though so innocent as they are, they were, in fact, playing the role not of a breadwinner, but they will have to play that kind of critical role. In actual fact, they were pushed to go out there. It becomes a norm for you, even as a child in school, when you are under 16 years or in secondary school. It is how lucky you had to have a big man in the society. That's what makes you at least a bit welcome in the home, because they know that, yes, you are making your own contribution. So when those values have turned upside down, because it's more about survival, people will not even have the space to internalize good values in terms of what should be the best way to bring up my child. So it's just so tight. It's just so difficult. The home is so important, but then I think also it's extremely difficult to talk about the home just in isolation, because if we look, and even as it is now, you go into some of those areas. When I went to Sierra Leone, I went to the province. I was shocked to see the level of prostitution and the very young girls now that we are parading the streets. I was just too shocked. I said, in our own time when I was a teacher there, it has not gone so bad up to that point. But let's not forget that one thing we would say about Sierra Leone, people before this time and before the war perhaps recognize that people are hospitable, people are warm, and I think credit to the provincial. When we leave Freetown and then we go to the provinces, you want to see that kind of tolerance. You want to see that kind of hospitality that is given to you. That was there, which everyone, it was part of our national what? People would cherish it. You say, oh, you go to the province, people will make the sacrifice. They would give up their bed for you. Even as poor as they are, you want to look at the way they will receive you and every other thing. Unfortunately, when they come back to Freetown, some of us will have to be hiding away from them because as poor as they are, we cannot even equate the reception and what they will give to us when we're going to the province. So we must think that even poor as they are, they have those values, they have those norms. That's part of humanity. But I think along the line, it's been eroded by hardship. It's been eroded by the environment itself because it's so difficult to bring up your child in an environment in which, because if we want to talk about civic responsibility, thank God now with the present government, we are now talking about free education. We cannot talk about civic responsibility without education, be it formal or informal, but more so the aspect of formal. In some other contexts and in some other countries, far before now, especially in the South, when they talk about compulsory education, the quality of it from primary to secondary school, it is there. Even overseas now, when you come across, I just take note of things. You come across most people from Southern Africa, Zimbabwe and South Africa, the way they communicate, you would see that, yes, their country had invested so much, at least in providing that basic form of education. It doesn't mean that we can be well educated and then we still lack that civic culture, that civic awareness. But by and large, it's intertwined. That education should be there. So for me, where did it go wrong? I would safely say, although it is not political, but I would safely say it is the politics over time that has failed the nation. For a country whose population before then was just less than 5 million, and when you consider our resources that we have in terms of our gold, diamond, you may begin to wonder, in fact, why can't we afford a very decent primary school in every chiefdom? Why can't we afford a very decent clinic in every chiefdom so that we begin to at least enhance the status of people? And when a man is hungry, you cannot talk to that person about civic responsibility. When poverty grips you, you cannot talk about your role to the society because it's all about yourself. We're all left to fend for ourselves. So in a way, it's a balance also, but I think we had gone wrong because by and large, I would say the states had failed in its responsibility for it to trickle down to the community level and to the home.
Thank you very much, Alito. Thank you for that. Very well said. We cannot talk about civic responsibility outside of opportunities. You have talked about how the home, the family has disintegrated, the value systems that we prided ourselves on, it's all gone now. But beyond that, we are also operating in a socio-economic and context. And therefore, that means that we need to ensure that we provide opportunities for people to be able to have a stake. Let me read a comment, that just came in from Edward Cabo, who is saying, how do you promote civic responsibilities and a sense of duty among citizens who feel, and rightly so, that they not have a stake in running the state? In Sierra Leone, citizens are marginalized by political and ruling elite. Marginalization produces a lack of interest among citizens in a way that the state runs. When people would be concerned with most burning issues, they are, for the most part, only concerned about the individual survival. So this notion of, if I cannot survive, you cannot expect me to take on the bigger issues and be a patriotic citizen. How do we overcome that? Dr. Hingston, let me throw that to you. Again, I come back to you because I want to relate this to South Africa. South Africa is being described as one of the countries that has perhaps one of the highest level of inequalities. And we know that in every society we have huge inequalities between individuals, among communities. That is likely to create, a sense of frustration that, if not properly managed, could explode, into civic, unrest and possibly conflict. We have seen, for instance, not just in South Africa, in Leone and other parts of the world, where with the advent of COVID-19, all the measures that have been put in place by states to try to contain the situation, the socio-economic concerns of citizens come to the fore. And so at the risk of, people say, I'd rather die, of COVID than die of hunger, and so, even in terms of exercising your responsibility to ensure that you protect yourself and others around you, the concern, So in a way, what this gentleman is saying, and I think, where we really want to drag this conversation, what is the nexus between that socio-economic well-being, of the people and their responsibility as citizens? How do you reconcile and put that in a Sierra Leonean context?
I think that is a very tough one. In the sense that it's very hard when someone is hungry, when someone needs to survive, when someone needs food, when someone needs money, to tell them about civic concerns. Because at times people are not interested because it is a matter of survival. At times you talk to most Sierra Leoneans and they will tell you the ground dry. Of course, you know what that means. It means there is no money, there is no food. And like me being in South Africa, people from home are constantly asking me for money, for so many things. And at times I do get cross, but at the same time, I do understand that it is hard for them as well. So when we want to start talking about civic duties and responsibilities, you start talking about that to someone who is hungry, who needs money, who needs to pay school fees. It's a very tight line, And even in South Africa, basically it's the same. How can you get people to be concerned about other issues when they want just a meal for the day? And you spoke about the COVID issue as well. Here in South Africa, it's a matter of, we have one of the most stringent lockdowns, but people go out because, as you said, they will say, I'd rather die out there finding food than stay in the house and being safe. So it's a very tight line, because survival at the end of the day is the most is the basic human need. We all need food, water, shelter, money to survive. So saying that is one thing, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we should be discouraged as well, because it is doable. We can start with awareness. We can start awareness through the radio. We can do things like attitudinal changes, attitudinal change. I think in Sierra Leone some time back, there was even I don't know if there was a commission or there was something about attitudinal change, but I'm not sure how that went, because I think the government of the day was trying to change the attitude of people, to change the mindsets of people. But at the same time, the government also has to, the state, I would say the government, the state has to also come into play. Because let's say, for example, like they normally say people should not urinate around, because the place gets smelly and everything. But even as you say, make sure you don't urinate in public, or you don't urinate in town or wherever. There are no public toilets. So what happens then? If you say don't throw things in the drain, but then there are no bins, and then you say don't steal, but then that person is not paid enough. So there's always these dynamics as to what do you do to get people to be, to adhere to their civic duties, to adhere to their civic responsibilities. I think at the end of the day, it's a matter of creating the awareness from the home, teaching people values, because at the end of the day, you have people who are very poor, but they're honest, they have integrity, they will do the right thing. So we come back to the home and we start with teaching our kids. that despite the situation, despite the hardships, despite this, but as a citizen, this is what you do. Be honest, live by your integrity, do the right things. Probably we should start from the home, even at the school. I remember when I was going to school in Sierra Leone, we used to do what was known as civics. But I don't think it's been done now. Probably it's called social studies now, but I don't know much about that. But when I was going to school back during that time, when I was younger, we used to be taught civics in school, where we were taught our duties as that we should be good citizens for our country. So probably they need to relook at things like that. So we talk about the home itself, bringing up the values of the child. But at the same time, we also need to look at what our educational institutions can do as well. But at the end of the day, it comes to survival. And when someone is hungry, they can do anything. It's not about, you try to even talk to them, because even here at times, I'm so passionate about Sierra Leone. Those who know me, they would always say, Claudine, you are one of you are very patriotic. And I said, yeah. I said, although I'm living in South Africa, but my heart is in Sierra Leone. It's my home. And I think we also need to start taking pride in our country, because that is also another issue. I think many Sierra Leoneans don't take pride in their country. And I always tell people, if you don't take pride in your country, that means you're not taking pride in yourself as an individual. Because at the end of the day, you are a Sierra Leonean, even if you have a dual citizenship. At the end of the day, you are who you are. No one can take that away from you. So we also need to start inculcating pride in our children, that you are a Sierra Leonean first and foremost, and you should do what is good for Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Einstein. Let me read some comments that just speak to the last point that you just made. Dwati here said, I feel that every citizen has a civic responsibility to ensure that they do the right thing. This only comes from a sense of national pride and an understanding of the impact of our actions on our communities and the nation. This will come only come when people feel they are valued. Cecil Dadson is saying, we started going wrong when we stopped teaching civics as a subject in our schools. The subject should be studied from primary school all the way to university. Dr. Freeman was making a point about education. I think, education also requires, ensuring that we have the right kind of curriculum. I'm aware that the Ministry of Education, for instance, has embarked on a curriculum review process, which hopefully will begin to look at issues of civics. But this is a very important point, because I think as we talk about rights, responsibilities, and all of that, it goes back to the issue of what is our loyalty to the nation? What is our loyalty, and how do we exercise that loyalty through the kind of educational system that we build? So these are very interesting points that are coming up. I encourage you to keep bringing the points on. I don't know if Masako has joined us, or he's probably not going to join us any further. But let's move forward. Let's come to this very difficult issue of ethno-regional divides. And now we talk about citizenship. We talk about we are the same people. We have so much social connection, but we also know the reality of our social life is such that, and indeed political life is such that we have been very much polarized, along ethnic and regional lines. So then the question is, what can we do as citizens to manage our differences, particularly those that border on ethnicity and regionalism? I mean, after all, identity in of itself is a fact of human existence. People exist and they belong to certain identity groups by no choice of them themselves. They find themselves in society. They must be able to manage those differences in a way that the diversity of those experiences would be put together effectively to promote the national good. Unfortunately, in our country and across the continent, we have been polarized, along ethnic and regional lines. So the question is, what can we do to ensure that we reverse that? Because all of the issues that we talk about in our daily lives, also hit around this issue, particularly when it comes, to our public discourse. So what responsibilities do we have? What can we do practically, given the reality of the situation, to ensure that indeed we're able to celebrate our diversity and not polarize along the lines of ethnicity and regionalism, at the risk of losing out, because most people they end up just step by the wayside and are not able to contribute their full potential to what the national agenda is, whatever that may be. Dr. Freeman, let me bring you in on this one and kick off the conversation.
So do you, but which are you referring to me?
Yes, I'm referring to you. I mean, I'm saying, how do we begin to reverse this trend of, ethnic and regional divide that is so much a part, of our public life today, which in of itself is having impact on, our roles and responsibilities as citizens.
Yeah. Wow. 60 years after independence. And even at this point, we are still struggling in terms of what can we do, at least to cure that that divide. As I was reflecting on this topic also, there was something about what makes people become apathetic in terms of disengaging. And I said, for me, I would also want to flip it around, which is as a result of that tribal and regional divide. What I observed when I was in Sierra Leone, rather than the apathy, which is also there, is what I would call the complacency, that kind of self-satisfaction. And when we examine that one, then we begin to see the extent to which the minds of people also have been damaged. In just a simple example, people to an extent are so self-satisfied. I live in a community in which there are people around me. They will wake up in the morning and without even they're not sure where they're going to get the first meal of the day, but they will stand out there, arguing emotionally in support of the system that is in fact not even providing for them. Why? Because it is their tribesman who is in power. Why? Because it is their brother or sister or somebody from their region who is in power. When I looked at that, I said, wow. So in fact, that has even clouded the thinking, because civic responsibility is also about holding those whom we've given our consent to rule us, to hold them to account if they are not measuring up. But then that self-satisfaction also, I think, is what has also created that damage. And if we are talking about the ethno-political divide, except now we are now talking about something very radical, and what should be that kind of radical, that kind of revolution. True to say, in the social angle, there are so many intermarriages, and which could have helped us in one way or the other. Exactly. So many. Gone are the days in which even, for example, the Creoles would frown at, say, all the Fulas, because those were the two typical that we are like into that corner of not wanting to come out. But that shows that's something positive, because we now see that people are now courageous enough to step out and say, no, this is not about tribe anymore. So if we can translate that social behavior into our political thinking or into our decision-making process, I think that could go a long way. So perhaps, is it an aspect of social education? But I just think that 60 years of independence, and yet we still cannot have it right. We are still divided. The division is so very strong along tribe and around region. And unfortunately for us, we cannot hide away from it. the political landscape has also reinforced the division. And unfortunately, this is not new to Sierra Leone, because even in other parts of the world, unfortunately, I think perhaps the good thing is that I don't know whether it is the language through the effects of colonialism and what the division, and is it the language? Because if we look at where we are, there are tribal politics. Nobody will not run away from that. But I don't think it is as deep as in our own situation, in which people have been divided along tribe, that cultural grouping in terms of this is my countryman, we speak the same language or not. So the mindset again will come back to that. What do we need to do, at least, to change that mindset? The social behavior, we've seen a lot of it. But if I want to be very brutal on that aspect, I think we also need to dismantle the structures that are reinforcing the ethno-political divide. And I think that is the biggest task for us. Until and unless those structures, if they are not dismantled, if they continue to exist, we'll come back again. Well, perhaps we'll not live again for another. How many of us here are going to live again for another 50 years? So our children and great-grandchildren will still addressing this question, because it's not going anywhere. So if we need to be honest with ourselves, first and foremost, as Sierra Leoneans, we must begin to look at the structures. What are the structures that are reinforcing that ethno-political divide? Because we are not helping our people. It's not easy to say education, civic education. It's not easy to say it's about raising awareness. Even if you raise awareness, even to what extent how much time you invest in civic education, if the structures are still there, all the efforts will go in vain. So if you ask me what to do, I would say dismantle the structures. But how? And where do we start in terms of it? Because that's the only way perhaps we can begin to change the minds of people to say, look, this is not that sentiment, we should put it away. Because what that sentiment does is to just make us blind to the reality. And as part of our civic education also, when it comes to the important aspect of voting, we should be able to have that ability to vote for people who we think are the people, the right people to govern us for the next 5 years, the people to whom we're going to give that consent. But how do we make sure that we have it right within that structure of that political divide? So for me, it's something very serious. But let's also consider the positive. If Sierra Leoneans can at least jump that hurdle on the social angle, intermarriages, which is now so predominant. And even now you see that many people living, before this time, some people will not venture. Perhaps an Southeasterner will not venture of wanting to go to the northern region to stay and work there. Things have changed. You go to the north, you will see so many Southeasterners. You go to the south and the east, you also see so many northerners. So those are values that are there, which we can tap into. But then the psychological barriers are the barriers that we need to dismantle. And before we want to dismantle those barriers also, we must look at the physical structures. And if we don't need, it's a complicated thing. I would just shroud it in that way to say we can start to succeed when we dismantle those structures that are reinforcing those very sentiments in our people.
Give us an example of some of those structures. I mean,
we cannot blame ourselves. Unfortunately, we have two major tribes in our country. Two major tribes, and when those tribes and groupings begin to congregate itself into an interest group without much diversity, in a way, we are translating that sentiment down to the community level. And can we blame ourselves? Perhaps no, because those structures have been there. The tribal setup, we cannot blame ourselves. It has been there. So if I think the other way we can address it is from the political level, I would always say, it's not political, but I would always say we missed the opportunity when we had NPRC. That could have created that vacuum for us to start all over again from somewhere, and perhaps we would have started to see the change. But people these days are so blind. We are so sentimental. Even the grassroots man, The example that I've given, I've seen those examples. You will see them coming out in the morning. In my community, the passion with which they will be there. They don't want to hear anything, even if things are not going on right. Even if, for those of us that we are very helpful around, we are the very ones, in fact, that would always be coming around to offer some help. So people are so entrenched in their thinking. So what is creating that thickness in people? Why are people not being able to dismantle to say, well, so that's why I'm talking about the structure. And all the structures that there are the political structures. Would it come a time in which perhaps we would say, let's have a political system in which we want to make sure that you can only be qualified as a political system when you have this percentage. I'm just trying, perhaps it's not real. When you have this percentage or representation of ethnic group in your political party, is that what we want to do to make it more radical? Is that possible? When you talk about the ethno-political divide, we also talk about the geographical boundaries and every other thing. But we will be here talking, we'll come back again 50 years talking. The structures are the very structures that have reinforced those sentiments in our people and the ethno-political divide. So I'm not too sure. I think perhaps, I don't know what's going on in Eastern Africa and the fact that Swahili and, well, we also have the Creole language, which seems to be the lingua franca. Is that helping in a way to create that kind of unity among people? Is that helping to dismantle that divide within our people? But I think, and that is a very important issue, because we see the downside of it when it comes to election, which should be the only way that we should be prepared to exercise that ability. People are using this mantra of putting the country first. But then these days, if we have to be honest ourselves, it's more about the sentiments rather than the interests of the country. So perhaps we cannot blame anyone, but we need to think radical, and we're fine to it now, but then I think there can still be hope one day for our country. But that complacency among citizens, in a way, has ended up to erode the culture of civic responsibility, because when the people are blind by that sentiment, they even refuse to question things. You would see in the community, for example, you know that this man is working in a place. I used to live in a community. That man was working, of course, in Queen Elizabeth. You know that when that man is coming home, you know the things that man is coming home with definitely are things that have been robbed from other people. Yet that man will be the most popular somebody in that community. Why? Because by the end of the day, that person would have a way again of dishing some of those loots into the very people that are so poor. So we lost the value of, and perhaps also we don't have role models, which is unfortunate. We don't have role models. And we are in a country in which we do not want to recognize people for their values and make those people role models, which could, in fact, because I can still remember, I have a personal story which I would always tell. When in the days of Akibobet, then the voucher gate scandal, it's not because it was my own relative, but it was my own uncle who was a financial controller, the late Elijah Cole. Credit to him. He was the one that exposed that scandal. When he returned home, 3/4 of the remnants of the money was in our house. I was a little boy, but I witnessed that. But like somebody was talking about the pride. He was just so proud. Just for one thing, BBC hailed him as one of the most honest men in Sierra Leone. He kept that tape. Wherever he went, he'd be playing it. What he would ever appreciate when he went to the province, satisfaction also, the little gifts that would be given to him. There was a point when they set up the Anti-Corruption Commission. I was there, I questioned it, the first committee that was set up in terms of the civil society. I said, who are the people that you brought into this committee that should serve as role model of the society? So we don't compensate people for the good work they have done, make them role model, which in turn, those are the people that should be going to the schools, the universities, giving talks, trying to let people see what it means, at least, for you to be honest, what it means for you to be at least decent. But I think also that is another thing perhaps we need to do within the ethno-political divide. I would say dismantle the structures if we can, but if not, let's try to identify role models from whatever ethnic background and put those people in prominent position. Not role models because of the type of cars they are driving. That's the thing, again, we've lost our value. It's all about the Jeeps, and it's all about what? If you are not driving a Jeep in Sierra Leone, nobody notices you. So we see again how we've lost that value. At times I think I said, oh, how, in terms of the money of fuel that you will use just to go to work every day and all of that. So it is a big ask, but I think we need to start somewhere. Otherwise, this is a problem that we would never be able to solve. Let's start with the structures, and if it is possible, dismantle those structures. But when is that going to be, and how?
Dr. Freeman, I don't know if I can see a message here. Sorry, guys, after struggling over an hour to connect. Is that Masakoi? I just connected and I'm here. Sure, it will be redundant. It will be redundant. If you're there, I would like to give you the floor. Have you joined us, Ahmed Masakoi? No? Okay, let's move on. Thank you very much, Dr. Freeman, for those very interesting points. Role models, we need people who can look up to as society, as communities, as families even. I mean, even in the family, you need to, when you're growing up in a family, and I'm sure during our time, and I'm not so sure now, everybody aspired to become like some uncle of theirs or some aunt who had achieved, some kind of a glory down the road. But you're clearly saying that we seem to have lost that now. It's almost like we celebrate those who, have amassed a lot of wealth, albeit by not working honestly for those wealth that they've had. And rather we despise those who we think do not have the material standing in society, and with that we keep undermining the whole essence, of the moral fabric of the society that we want to build. I can see
Masako is in, moderator. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Welcome the discussion, Mr. Masakoi. We are moving on, but I would want to, as you know, we are having a discussion on civic responsibilities. You are on the ground in Freetown. I want to give you an opportunity to give us your understanding of civic responsibilities and the state of affairs in Sierra Leone today. We've talked about many issues, already. This segment actually has been looking at the regional divide that we have in our country today, and we're trying to probe the question. How did we get to the point where we seem to look at things, particularly in our public discourse, along those ethnic and regional lines? So let me give you the floor to step in. Give us your take on how you see citizens, exercising their responsibilities, but also their relationship with the state, and perhaps you can also talk about the regional divide that is the big elephant in the room that we're dealing with today in our country.
Yes, thank you, and I'm sorry for connecting late to the program. I think I only came in after more than an hour of discussion, and probably I might have lost out on a number of issues, critical issues that you might have discussed. But I think picking up from your presentation and what I heard Dr. Freeman say in terms of the ethno-regional divide in our country, I would want to pin it down to some basic realities. And the realities that I want to probably expound or talk about are that this so-called ethno-regional divide that we are grappling with is only very extant. It's only very, very prominent, really, when it comes to electioneering time, right? But otherwise, you go to McKinney, you go to Bo, you go to Kenema, you go to Connaught, you meet people of different backgrounds, cohabiting peacefully, right? And I have worked, my last 5 years before 2018, I worked in Bo, I worked in McKinney, and I worked in Kenema. I worked for an international NGO that provided waste management services for all three aforementioned cities. And I stayed I touched base with all those three cities. The ethno-regional divide that we are talking of, right, was not as prominent before the 2018 electioneering period. You went to Bo, you went to Kenema, you went to McKinney, you'll find Connaught, you'll find Timis in Bo, you'll find Limbas in Bo, you'll find people of, if all three cities are cosmopolitan by nature. All three cities are cosmopolitan by nature, and the people cohabit peacefully. But what has happened over the years, and that's my personal opinion, right, is that when political parties that are in governance probably have failed to meet the expectations of the people, and it comes to election time, what they resort to is to, I'll call them those traditional cleavages, right? Because if before elections, you really don't feel, you don't sense it. You go to Bo, there is even a whole large Limba settlement. You go to Duvubu section, you go to Kenema, Lambayama, and what? These are areas that are predominantly occupied by people from the northern part of the country. You go to McKinney, in fact, in that constituency 28 area, which is now, I think, constituency 35, it comprises people from the Madingo and Fula tribes. So what I'm saying here is the tribal and regional divide that we are harping on now only takes center stage when elections draw nigh. And that is, and it only comes to the fore when political parties have failed, especially ruling parties, have failed to deliver on the promises they made to the people for which they were voted in. And yes, I'm not oblivious of the fact that we are, I mean, those cards are not played, right, before then. But I am saying here, if only we try to urge our political parties to live up to their duties and responsibilities, their manifesto promises, right? Give themselves a national broader outlook and deliver on promises, I mean, on the services. I'm not sure we'll get to the point where tribe or region, or even to some extent, religion can really take center stage in our body politic. Unfortunately, when it comes to that time, that's what happens. But in terms of really the civic responsibility of the people to the state, I don't know if this has been dealt with adequately before I joined in. But I'm always looking at the duality of the responsibility between the state and the people, the state and the citizens, right? Both ways. I spoke of the duality of responsibilities. Both ways, we have duties, we have responsibilities. The duty bearers and the right holders both have duties and responsibilities. And for we are talking of approaching 60 years of independence of Sierra Leone. I think our history in terms of the fulfillment of the expectations of the people is replete with disappointments, with frustration, and largely disillusionment of the people, which accounts to some extent for the people abandoning their civic responsibilities to the state. I mean, we had President Momo come in with his, he came in with his Green Revolution. You would want to ask the question, where did that take us? Was the Green Revolution really a success of the Momo regime? That's another matter probably for discussion any other day. We also look at the late Tijan Kaba era, or maybe in between the Tijan Kaba era and the Momor era, we look at the 4-year stint of the NPRC in terms of ending the war, restoring democratic the country back to multi-party democracy and economic stability. Did they really fulfill their promises to the people? We have a lot of questions. President Kaba came with his food security drive. He promised the people that before probably 2017, 2015, no Sierra Leonean should go to bed hungry. Did he achieve that? So those broken and failed promises have always been responsible for the people also not fully living up to their civic responsibilities. But I keep saying here that even though probably governments might have failed to deliver on their promises, but we owe ourselves a duty. We owe ourselves a responsibility, at least in terms of living up to some standard, in terms of our responsibilities to our state, to ourselves, and to the state. For instance, I would want to confine some of these things to some basic things. I don't think you need the state, you need the government to tell you to manage your waste, the data you generate at home. No, because if you don't manage your waste, for instance, effectively, the effect comes back to hit you, the individual. If you are naturally the polluter, you are generating waste, for instance, at home, right? So if you don't manage your waste effectively, what happens is that the effects of waste management will hit you. Your society, your environment, your home probably will be infested with rats, other rodents, and that has other attendant consequences. Those have attendant consequences. So I started off on the duality of responsibilities, but the people, but the citizens and the state. And I would say the failure or the non-performance of governments over the years probably is largely responsible for the state of disillusionment of the people. I had the loss of societal values, right? And that's because we have narrowed, we have confined ourselves to some prism, the prism of dependence on other people. So we don't reward people for excellence. We hardly reward people for excellence. We hardly reward people for hard work. What happens in our society is we tend to venerate people whose achievements are really largely based on untoward practices. I don't want to really use on sleaze or graft, but I think it hinges on untoward principles. And what they do, they eat the bread and then the crumbs they give to the people. The majority of the people, they eat the bread and then the breadcrumbs they share with the people, and then some people feel satisfied with that. So we've had a moral decadence in our society spanning some 4 decades. And I would also want to say that in terms of reversing that trend, it involves a lot. Like Dr. Freeman said, dismantling the structures, the existing structures. But I probably might want to know in details what he meant by dismantling the existing structures. But I would want to focus largely on education. Because if you have an educated public on even their civic responsibilities, right, then we might, and I'm being very cautious in the use of we might get there. I'm particularly happy that the present government has created this Civic Education Commission, and I hope that commission is actually empowered to deliver on its mandate. Because we are talking about citizens' civic responsibilities, but do they even know these responsibilities? Do they even know how they interface? Do they even know the relationship between them and the governing elite? Right? We are talking about social. We talk about these things in theoretical terms: social contract, social contract. What is this social contract? What does it really entail? Tell the people, for them to know that. Much as they voted for those people, but those people in authority owe them a duty, owe them some responsibilities that they should live up to. Do they really know these things? So it involves a lot of critical thinking and implementation for us to probably reverse that trend. I think I would want to stop there for now. Since I only came in late, I don't want to deviate totally, but I hope I'm on course.
Well, thank you very much for being very, very direct and very provocative. I think you put things into context. You've raised some very important points about the duality. Freeman made that point earlier on about if you talk about citizens having responsibility, you must also interrogate the role of the state. But I think you bring in a new dimension, which we hadn't focused on, the role of political parties, and the extent to which failure by successive governments have actually precipitated the use of ethnicity and tribalism as well.
We cannot divorce, Mr. Moderator, we have to be honest with ourselves. In this discourse about civic responsibilities, we cannot divorce the role of political parties from it. If we say, we cannot insulate and isolate political parties from civic responsibilities, because at the end of the day, when we look at our political history in this country, we are over two prominent parties that have always governed, right? And you cannot insulate them from any failure or success. Certainly, that would be very unfair on the topic. And that brings us again to a whole lot of other issues. What are even the agents of imbibing some cultural values in the people in the societies? What is the role of parents? What is the role of the church? What is the role of teachers in school in terms of inculcating values into our children? Now, for instance, we have had a government that has brought in a school bus system. Good, perfect, as far as I'm concerned, right? It's a brilliant initiative. I can applaud that any day. But what have we as parents with school-going children done, right? To instill a sense of responsibility in our children, to understand that those buses that government has bought is for their use, and they owe themselves a moral obligation to maintain them, so that successive, generations after them can benefit from such services. It wasn't there before. It has been introduced now. What are we doing as parents? What is the church doing to? So it's like I said, it's a multifaceted thing. It's so complex. It's so convoluted in discussing these things that you cannot take away. You cannot, for instance, isolate and insulate political parties. You cannot isolate even agents of change, right? From such discourses. So that's why probably I was just a bit brash and harsh. But I like to talk from a pragmatic point of view, because I'm just that kind of person.
Mr. Moderator.
Perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine. I think you made your point very clearly. We cannot dance around the issues, and we know elections are almost like war. Every time we go to elections, but I think we've even moved beyond that now, because you made the point. Maybe the polarization that we have today wasn't as it is right now prior to the 2018 election, and so I think it's perfectly welcome that you have been able to bring that nation into the conversation. Let me bring Sophia to back into this conversation.
Mr. Moderator. Sorry, I know it's well designed for other people. I just Mr. Masako has raised some very important points, and I think leaving us with some questions in our mind. And the aspect of when a government fails to deliver or to measure up in terms of its social contracts on its own side, and the people become disillusioned. The question also for us to think about, if by the end of the day we want to provide a solution, in the disillusionment of the people, what make them also to continue to owe that allegiance to the very system that is filling them over and over and period over time? I think that is something also perhaps we can think of another time. But I think the questions there, he raised some very important point that I just thought, okay, let me just throw that one quickly as food for thought for all of us also.
Sure. We'll come back to that, because of the conversation. But let me bring Sophia to back this issue of political parties and how, when governments fail, they then use those ethnic and regional divides. Masako made the point very clearly, and I think most Sierra Leoneans would agree that on a daily basis, we interact with one another. In fact, he makes a point that if you go across the country, communities are cosmopolitan. Freeman made the point earlier on about intermarriages that has been going on in the country for as long as we know. But yet, when it comes to electioneering, we see this tension building up, and I think we've even moved beyond that now, beyond, just the election period into even the post-election period, where everything one party does, the other one is likely to try to undermine, what they're doing. And in doing so, we're mobilizing ethnic and regional, sentiments, and unfortunately, putting young people. I mean, somebody made a point earlier on in the discussion about the youth. I think it was your very good self about youth lacking opportunity. I saw one comment earlier on, and the fact that they constitute the greater part of our population. I mean, there is all this debate in Africa about the youth bulge, demographic dividend. I mean, the fact that Africa has a very young population, but the reality also is that that very young population does not seem to have an opportunity to fulfill their full potential, and so they remain at the mercy, of political elites who thrive, on ethnic entrepreneurship, if you will. So I want you to zero in on this question of political parties and vis-a-vis their role in promoting ethnic and regional divides, and what can we as citizens do? Because I think most of you on the panel have echoed the point quite right, so that in spite of all the challenges, we should be able as citizens to be able to say, yes, we know we are getting along on a regular basis. And somebody used to say that in Africa we have what we call politics of the belly. During election time, the politicians come with bags of rice and then they mobilize us, along ethnic lines, and then they disappear. They don't come back until the next election cycle. And when they mobilize us, we go against the very community that we have been coexisting with. How do we break that part? So I want you to zero in on that point, and as we move the conversation along.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and it has been very interesting. Dr. Freeman, Mr. Masaki, it's really valid point. How do we come in as a community or as a society to break that pattern? We have to go back. We have to get our moral compasses back to our core values. That's a starting point, because if we love ourselves, we are loyal to ourselves and this country, we are faithful to this country, we are ready to die for this country, we are ready to honor this country, because all of these values are the things that will drive us to be able to make sure we take the correct or the proper messages to our people, that country first before politics, family first, country, and the politics is last. We really have to constantly reminding ourselves that we have no other country besides Sierra Leone, and that we owe our loyalty, just like the pledge said, I love my love. How do you say? I pledge my love and loyalty to my country, Sierra Leone. How many of us are following that pledge? How many of our politicians are following that pledge? If we come in as a community, breakers, we have to take our moral compass back to the core, because we carry these values. That's the only way we'll be able to that impact or that difference. I'm not a policy maker, but I am coming from a community perspective, because if you are in position, you are a politician, I am part of the community, and you give your money to my community to buy their votes, and I, as one of the stakeholders within the community, is not able to convince that voter that don't take that money, then something is wrong with me also. Because we need to have that moral values that should, what is really morally wrong and what is morally right. We need that within the communities. And in all honesty, I think whilst we're talking about civic responsibilities and duties, let us really, really try to enforce the pledge, the national pledge, within our children or our community or ourselves, because we have key words in that pledge that if we follow, to have love and empathy, whether you're poor or rich, to have that kind of love for yourself and your community. Sorry, my kids are being a little bit noisy. If we have those kind of values, respect for authority, when someone in authority makes a mistake, they should go back to the community, apologize. We never have that in this country. People do things with impunity. Nobody apologizes for anything. So tell me, how are we going to change that when those who are leading us, or those who are in authority, from the pastors to the imams, to the paramount chiefs, when they make mistakes, they really know they have done something wrong, they don't apologize to their communities? So how are we going to change that? It is a hard one. It is very, very hard. How are we going to change that? Because we might have all of these values, we might have all of the ways to go about it, but when you go and talk to somebody, as soon as you turn your back, say, there are plenty to talk in the past. That politician can't give you money. That don't can give you t-shirts. That don't pay me school fee. You see, there was incident before 2018 during the electioneering, as Mr. Massa was saying. So I saw this group who went to this Abacha women, those who were the Abacha women. Not all of them vote in this country. When you want them to make noise for you, you just go give them money. Some I see this money when they can't give una so. You go for go vote. Now he say me, mommy. He say I know they go vote. He say I know they left me market for go vote. He said that for pay me pikin school fee. You see, he said I go for pay me pikin school fee. I not get choice. This small space is I sit down so I go for pay for and say if they can't give me money, I go eat them, but I not go for go vote. You see, I never knew that many of them don't even have voters ID card in this country. You see, so we really have to go back to the pledge. All the key words that are there, we have to learn those words, or really take it to heart. Because when we take it to heart, then we will act upon it. Then we will feel sorry for our people. We will actually be the example. We will be the role models within our communities when we have all of these values put together and we are working on it.
Thank you very much. We need to we need to move beyond just rhetoric of saying the pledge. We need to do things actually to make sure that we lend substance to that pledge. There's a comment here from Donald Duarte, which says people in positions of authority should set the right example by not condoning lawless just to get votes to win elections. That's part of the problem. You know, if you want to build, you know, a peaceful, lawful society, then you know you have to lead by example. But like you say, I mean, you mentioned not just the political leadership, but the failure of even our community leaders, whether it's our religious leaders, our civic leaders, to take responsibility, to be held accountable. When people do wrong, they're not willing to take responsibility for that, and that's part of the problem. Let's move on. Let me bring back Dr. Hingston into the conversation, and I want you to also speak to this issue of political parties and the role that they have played in polarizing, our society along ethnic and regional lines. But I want you to paint a gender lens for us, because oftentimes we talk about our challenges without necessarily, I mean, most of the political problems that we've had, whether we want to accept it or not, have been largely caused by men. I mean, and in any case, gender is not necessarily just about, women. Gender is about, both sexes. But if the truth be told, our political discourse, our political life has been dominated largely by men. Of course, there is a great push now, globally within our region, ensure that you have more female participation in public life. But looking at where we are, in Sierra Leone, and focusing on this issue of ethno-regional divide and the role that political parties play, I wonder if you can refer us a little bit on the gender dimension of that and see, where we take that conversation to. Dr. Hingston? Is Dr. Hingston with us?
I think for some reason she's not been able to reaccess the program moderator, Dr. Lamine.
Okay. So maybe Sophia too. Let me throw that back to you. I mean, why don't you speak to the gender, dimension of this particular, problematic that we're dealing with, the role of political parties and the role that they play in creating that. I mean, you're talking about the women on Abacha's
Sir, yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, from in my view, the political parties, again, they are not doing that much when it comes to the gender aspect. Most often the women are being disenfranchised almost all the time, when it comes to the political aspect within the country. Some of them, they are scared to participate. I would say the past election, we had some female representations. We are still struggling. Women are still struggling with some of these issues. And when it comes to politics, we don't want to talk about politics, but it's something that needs, we representation we need, we desire. We don't get it in country. So we are not being given positions of authority where we where we will say, we have to make decision making positions are not given to women all the time. It's just very few. The number is very few, and women play such a vital role. They play such a vital role in our meetings. They bring people together. They bring even sort of peacemaking within the country. It's the women most often that leads on that. The women they are almost all over the place. but most often we are the ones that are left out. Majority, most of the time, it's the women that are left out, and you know, we don't really. That's we. I'm not a I'm not a gender. It's just my own. We see that we don't get much of anything anyway, you know, and we are encouraging. We are talking to with to young people to be more aware about, especially the girls, for them to be more aware about things within the community they can participate in, or to lend their voices in, on, you know, we are changing that little by little because we have a lot of returnees, I would say, people from the diaspora, women who are doing good work in Sierra Leone. They've come and joined those on the ground, and they are making a lot of inroads with the young people or young girls. My only issue also is that the climate, the climate is not so conducive in terms of women's freedom or safety, because there are a lot of issues, gender-based violence going on, and for women access to the justice system or the justice that they deserve when some of these issues come on. A lot of issues are going on at the moment on the ground, wherein women, girls, even boys are being raped, and it's taking a long time, for access. And most often the perpetrators, they run away, or they just let them go after a while. So as a parent, I feel worried, or as a woman, I don't feel safe. I don't stay out late because for me, it's no longer safe. So, and I believe all what we are discussing here hinges on women being part of the solution, or women being able to take part in, in whatever developmental thing that is going on in the country. So if we are not feeling safe and we are not taking part, or we don't have decision-making positions, that the state is giving out, we are still being left behind in many ways, you see. So I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, but
Absolutely, absolutely does. Let me bring the men into this conversation. Dr. Freeman, can you reflect on the gender issue? But before I do that, there is a comment here which is specifically directed at something you had said before. Patrick Hassan Molai Kuruma says, Dr. Freeman's suggestion of dismantling the institutions that are responsible for ethno-regional politics is unrealistic. Would the panel consider supporting the proposition that the state, rather than individuals, should fund all political parties in regional and national elections? Quite a very interesting question. So maybe why don't you reflect on the gender question, and then maybe you can come back to this issue of whether in fact the state because what we are really talking about also is find some ways to begin to have a much more broader conversation about political reforms, and if political parties seem to be part of the problem, as we seem to be acknowledging, then the question becomes also, how do we fund those political parties? And I think the concern of Mr. Conte is to, or rather his suggestion, whether you would agree that we begin to go in that direction where the state can actually fund political parties, as opposed to leaving that to the domain of individuals and stakeholders of the party. Prima.
Yeah, in all of this also, we see to a certain extent how we've become prisoners in our own thoughts and in our own conscience. We live in a society also that is, we have that kind of conscious bias. Because how can we talk about gender representation when in the home. And in most traditional societies also, that patriarchal system, men hold the primary power in a way. So women don't have voices. You are there perhaps to listen and not to speak. So and it's from that level that it starts to the point that when we think that now we now start to share the same platform with them, we thought that sorry about that. We think that they are inferior to us because it starts from the home. So perhaps along the line we might be talking about gender revolution, but then how do we penetrate that one also into the mindset of our traditional society also? So it's a big take. Perhaps is it because of the economic goals, but again that undermines itself, because in most traditional societies also we see women are the breadwinner. We cannot underestimate that fact. They are the ones with multiple roles they play, apart from the fact that childbearing, they'll be out there doing everything. So why is it that when it comes to representation, we think that oh, it should be an all-male affair? But when I talk about the conscience bias and to the extent in which we ourselves are not like thinking right, even the women themselves are denying their own very folks. So you begin to wonder what's going on in the society. Because I remember a time when, if you want to try a female candidate to run for president, I think that's a female candidate will have more opposition from women than from men. So where is that leading to? Is this as a result of the way society has contaminated the minds that women should not be given that chance? But I think more importantly, if we look at what is going on in the global scene, women have been put to shame. COVID-19 had exposed us that perhaps we show something about that chauvinism in us. We show something that strong man power. But in terms of thinking capacity, in terms of empathy, which society needs, women have put us to shame. Because interestingly, most of the countries that have succeeded to control and combat the spread of COVID-19, the data are coming out. Most of those countries are countries that are being headed by women. What is that telling us about the capability and the capacity of women? So why are we denying them that chance also? So I keep on again. Yes, well, last time you said it is unrealistic. Then if we don't take a conscious approach, we would still be living with these problems. Do we want to talk about gender representation? So why not make it a must to say every political party, out of if you're having 120 something representative, out of your 127 representative, 50% should be women? Why should that be unrealistic? Why should we also say that if we want to dismantle this ethno-political divide? Because Mr. Basako raised a very important point, and I said, well, the irony in that also, the people have been disappointed by the very system. State had failed to measure up in terms of their social contract. Even though they have reneged, yet the people are still ready to give them that trust again, that consent. So where do we go from there? What's keeping people so blind as to not exercise that ability? Yes, too, it is election. So election is one of the most, and voting is one of the most powerful tool everybody could have in a democratic society. But what is now in that ability in us, that even though we have not been, political parties have disappointed us, yet when another round of election comes, we still allow them, or we still play into that narrative. So I was still saying, perhaps if we are not ready to do something radical, even along the line of gender, talk about representation, let's be mathematical in this and stop the hypocrisy. If we do not take some of those conscious measures and say, if we want to talk about a political party, then this percentage should be in terms of female representation, because it is when things start at the top. We cannot talk about, when we talk about civic responsibility and change, attitudinal change, we will debate that again. At what level should it start? I would say it should start at the top. Because when it starts at the top, it would be very easy to just trickle down again. But most of the time, we're just looking at the bottom top approach. Yes, in terms of development, that's right. But when we want to talk about change in that society, I think it should start at the level of state actors So I would want to go back again if we want to really find solution and long-lasting solution. It is time perhaps to be more radical, take a radical approach to say, yes, it's time for us to have more female representation. What should be the quota of female representation? And gradually that will begin to change the mindset. Is it difficult for us to say if we want to cure this whole aspect of ethno-political divide that is almost like a...
Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman.
Very
Dr.
true.
Freeman.
Yeah. Can I just?
Sure.
No, let me just say. Let me just finish that quickly. Like what you said, that is correct. When those politicians have failed in their responsibility, what is giving them that audacity again to come back to the very people that they have disappointed, to tap into their tribal sentiment? So all of those things are things that we should begin to. So that was why I preferred, which might seem to be unrealistic, I said, dismantling the structures in the sense that it's not like they should not be there, but how do we reform those structures? How do we make sure that gender representation, we put it there to say, this should be the quota, this should be the percentage. And perhaps do we still want to apply that in terms of because Mr. Basako mentioned something about the outlook of these political institutions. Yes, sir, yeah.
Sure, thank you. So, yeah, Masako, why don't you come in and reflect on the gender question as well, and perhaps you can even say also on the question of whether we should start the position of we should start thinking about having the state funding political parties opposed to just leaving it for individuals and party stakeholders to do so.
Yeah, to the issue of gender participation, I've always had the belief that our aphorisms, right, our aphorisms are largely responsible for our impediments, the growth of our society. And the aphorisms I'm talking here of are largely inherent in our societies. I mean, if you live in a society, in a country where, for instance, in large parts of a particular area, women are not allowed to even run for chieftaincy, right? Then you begin to see the enormity of the problem that we are faced with in terms of bringing them fully on board the national body politic. So that is why even the issue of sometimes saying that representation in political parties should have some equality. It's, I mean, because of these age-old atavistic beliefs, things that I think belong really to the history books of our country. But we are still holding on to these beliefs. We are still clung on to them, right? We are finding it very difficult. We said this, as far as I'm concerned, some of these things are just rhetorics. And I think Dr. Freeman mentioned the opposition from within. The opposition from within, probably he meant even the women opposing themselves in terms of leadership. I remember when the multi-party democracy was reintroduced in 1996, right? And then there was this party that was led by the now late Geraldine Williams-Saho. I think her party barely managed to get something like 0.1% of votes. Zainab Hawa Bangura, a woman who has created so much impact in our society, before she ran for presidency with her movement or MOP party. I've just forgotten what the acronym really means, right? When she ran in the 2002 elections, she could not even mobilize, I mean, a tenth of the women in our society to vote for her. And unfortunately, this thing also has to do a lot with the religious belief. Sierra Leone is a largely Islamic country, largely Islamic, right? And we cannot shy away from it, that Islam itself, to some extent, does not make for equality. It does not. Even when you go to the mosque, the women are confined to the back. I've not seen a situation where a woman has led prayers, right? I mean, it's just that. It's just that, and our society is largely Islamic. I mean, when you go to another part of the country, the East, it's largely dominated. It's largely Islamic. I mean, Islam dominated, and that, to some extent, could, right, even though we are making conscious efforts to actually overhaul that mindset, right? But it has not been eroded yet to have a psyche that is pivoted on competence of of women, the strength of women. We've not been able to tap into that strength, that advantage which women have because of these aphorisms and some of these other issues that I see as impediments to our growth. And in terms of state funding political parties, I really don't think our political maturity in trying to really take our political maturity to the next level, we should start encouraging that, because I would see it as a tacit form of bribery. That's my opinion. I would see it as a tacit form of bribery.
Okay,
I'm going to stop there for now and maybe get.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up now. Let me just read a few comments that came in on the gender issue. Nas Fofana is saying, political parties are the gatekeepers of gross discrimination against women in our society. The intentional male-led institutions never provide platform with governance structures of their parties. They are happy to promote women's wings where the crowned woman who is very well aligned to their patriarchal ideologies. If they can't provide the space within the parties, how can you trust them to appoint or give women symbols at the national level? She then says, we must have women-led political parties to disrupt the status quo. Kiki Aziz Kamara is saying, gender representation in Sierra Leone is just a campaign tool for politicians, and unfortunately has never been applied in reality. Very interesting comments there. We are going to wrap up now. I'm going to give each of the speakers 2 minutes to tell us, give us their party shot. Where do we go from here? What would you recommend? I mean, it is a very interesting conversation. Many issues have been put on the floor. We need to focus those discussions. Maybe as we move along, we obviously would need to segment them. You know, I mean, there are issues of gender representation. There are issues of role of political parties. There is a bigger issue of regional divide in politics. And then, of course, we talk about the youth question. Perhaps as we go along, we may need to segment this and have specific discussions on them. But before we wrap up, let me read one comment that came in from Sergio Aziz Kamara as you think about your closing comment. He says, because remember, I mean, the topic of today's discussion is civic responsibility in Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
We've had many of these issues that are directly related to the core subject matter. So I think Sergio's comment is quite relevant as we think about moving forward. He's sort of taking us back to the beginning. So how can we build and sustain a sustainable civic responsibility that is directed to promote national/patriotic interests in the good of Sierra Leone? What are the existing practices to learn from, considering the perceived polarized political landscape based on partisan basis? So that's a thought you have in your mind. Let me go around the table once more and give you 2 minutes to wrap up. Give us your parting shots and maybe 1 or 2 specific recommendations in terms of how we move this conversation forward. I start with you, Safiatu. On mute. On mute. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done that. Thank you very much, sir. Yeah. What I will say is this has been very interesting and a learning process for me also, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity. What I will say is the first thing in terms of civic responsibilities, I think besides the civic education, the states should make youth service in country a must. You know, all of us, or those of us who have got children, moving forward, I really, you're never too old to learn. We have to make it a duty. People, even if it's a 6 months, some kind of training, whether it be it's just everybody. Once you are healthy, I think that they should make that mandatory moving forward, because we have to build up the mindset of everybody, or of people, whether you're rich or poor, because it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. When trouble comes, it affects everybody. You know, that's one. Then number two, in terms of the ethnic divide, I would say many of us have nowhere to go, because we have in-laws, sister-in-laws, or husbands who are different national tribes. So really have nowhere to go other than us as a community, you know, continue the conversation, sensitizing each other regarding peaceful coexistence, you know, on the development of our country and our families, you know. And also the political side, again, I would say you know, it would be nice if the political parties, you know, make it mandatory for more women representation. Let it be a law, you know, let them put it into law. Only when it becomes law will people act on it. Just by talking, nothing is going to, you know, they will not even know. Yeah, is my 2 minutes up? I was not even looking at the time.
30 more seconds.
Okay. 30 seconds. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay. Yes. Let us remember we only have one Sierra Leone, and as citizens, let us continue doing our duties, and also know that with our rights, we have responsibilities, and let us put this country first in all we do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's put Sierra Leone first, and let's ensure that we have national service for all young people, so that we can begin to inculcate in them the sense of duty and nationality. Thank you. Masakoi, your party thoughts?
Yes, I would say we need to build a national psyche. A national psyche that looks at Sierra Leone holistically, not Sierra Leone from a tribe, from a region, or from a political party, but a Sierra Leone that is intended to serve the purpose of all Sierra Leoneans, regardless of your background, your tribe, and your political inclination. Until that is done, because what I have found out is we have not even, we don't have a national psyche that is broader in outlook and perspective, right? What we have in existence is a psyche that is built more on cleavages, be them political, be them religious, be them tribal, be them regional. So I think we need to overhaul that and build a national psyche that is actually pivoted on Sierra Leone, and Sierra Leone. And let's stop praying for governments to fail, because when governments fail, we have failed as a people and as a nation. And I would also emphasize on education of the masses, the populace. Without education, sensitization, because now we are even talking about civic responsibilities, but I really doubt how many of those people, thousands of them out there, who are really conscious, who are really aware of these civic responsibilities and duties that we have spent so much time talking on. And I would also talk about, I would also appeal for economic emancipation, because when we move for that, when we build a society in which the economy is fairly distributed and lots of people don't have to feed from the breadcrumbs of the powers that be, then we might have find ourselves in a situation where people will say, not bring you tribe business now, not bring you region business now, but can't talk about saloon and how we go better generally. And I will end by saying, I think, I don't know if it was Lincoln or Kennedy who once said that, let us have faith that right makes might, and that faith, let us to the end dare to do our duties as we understand them. And that's just what I'll end with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very good points on the national psyche, on education, building a one Sierra Leone. Thank you very much. Let me just read a quick comment on education, which came in from Fode Suleimani. He said the panelists, I think because it's been coming across, throughout the conversation. The panelists have rightly mentioned the role of formal and informal education in promoting civic responsibility. It is obvious that the Sierra Leone formal education system is culturally, challenged. And the informal sectors educate the general citizenry about their civic responsibilities have gone tribal. We cannot continue to bemoan the decadence of our nation, which has happened over years. The question is, how do we change that trajectory? I think that speaks to, the national psyche, that you were talking about, ensuring that we engage the broad citizenry, because sometimes when we talk about education also, we seem to limit our conversation to just the formal structure. We have the informal structure, we have non-formal structures. And I think your point, Masako, about the fact that if you go out and engage ordinary citizens about civic responsibility, when they are concerned about, survival issues, they may not have, the luxury of thinking of what civic responsibility is all about. Eugene Cole also says, how do we define the content of the civic education that our society badly needs? Curriculum, which is one, way of doing it. Do we just get the younger generation? Do we just target the younger generation and consider the older a lost generation? What kind of delivery systems could we use, considering the socio-economic situation that the panel has so well talked about? Again, this issue of education, civic education, the generational dimension, the modes of delivery. Do we just do it in the classroom? We review the curriculum and we take it to the classroom. What about the bulk of our young people who are out there? What about the older generation who seem to hold to some of the so-called traditional beliefs that we don't want to change, which marginalize women in society, as we've heard about. These are all things that we need to think about. With that, let me come to Freeman to give his part shot. Freeman.
Yeah, I think coming back again and driving home what we are here for today about civic responsibilities in Sierra Leone, I would call for a cultural renewal in Sierra Leone, and it has to be a radical cultural change. Perhaps that can also be seen in terms of how do we consider women in politics. And no doubt with that cultural change, Sierra Leone will gradually inculcate our civic responsibility and patriotism. And it should manifest itself in all walks of life, and in which, wherever we are, we that optimum responsibility and commitment and dedication to duty. It should also involve, we should be honest and fairness in service delivery of both public officers and service deliverers. Now, politicians, most importantly, and public officers should see themselves as public servants, and that's not the case. And they should be accountable for their action. Let's come to the case of the police and the judiciary. They must safeguard the rule of law and dispose justice without fear and favor. Today, we are witnessing police brutality in the northern side of the country. That is endemic. Government of the past and government today. Why are we politicizing the police? So that is another important thing. Service providers, especially in the areas of health and education, they should deliver their services judiciously and eschew exploitation of service users. We should also have that ability to make sure that that tool which we have in us, that voting tool among Sierra Leoneans, we should have that ability to determine who should govern us through democratic election every 5 years. That is very important. We cannot just be throwing our vote just because of tribal sentiment. And this is where, for me, I want to home it all. The role of the civil society is very important. That has been my constituency. In all of this, Mr. Basako mentioned education. Civil society has a crucial role to play to ensure that the populace is well sensitized about civic responsibilities. And before I go away, I think over and above, everyone in our society should strive to be a role model. And if all of us strive to be a role model, even in our little corner, consequently, individuals and citizens, wherever they find themselves, we should function and behave patriotically, we should be respectable, and we should be accountable even in our manner. And public officials should find themselves in the discharge of their duties. So I think civic responsibility is a call to action. And if we want to take our country forward in terms of peace, stability, and development, we need to inculcate a very strong culture of civic responsibility and patriotism.
Thank you very much, Freeman. That was excellent. Culture, we need a radical cultural renewal. You raised a very important point about the police brutality. And I dare say this is an issue that we need to also, dissect, and do justice to it. And so this is something I'm throwing out. The extent to which we politicize and weaponize our security forces. They're supposed to be independent entities. How do we, if we're talking about, ethno-regional divide, the role of the security forces in that. We've had the incident in McKinney recently. Somebody just sending a comment about that just now. I said, why didn't we have a word about police brutality until Freeman mentioned it in closing remarks? Well, it's good that Freeman mentioned it. We were not shying away from it. It's just the fact that we do not want to, get into a situation where we get bogged down on one specific issue all throughout the conversation. Not that on this issue of civic responsibility, which is very important and very timely, we had to put it in other context, and I think we have dealt with a wide array of issues, and a number of issues have come from that we should dissect and go up, over them on case-by-case basis. And I think the issue of police brutality, issue of violence in our political life, is something that we definitely have to zero in on. Before I hand over to Mr. The coordinator, Mr. Bob Amma, I want to leave you with a short quote from the preamble of the UNESCO Constitution. I work for UNESCO, so I have to say this also. And I think it's something that we really need to reflect on, because if you look at the state of the world today, 75 years after the UN was founded and UNESCO was founded, the question that one would have to ask themselves is, to what extent have things changed? These organizations were established in the aftermath of war. But today we live in a very polarized world that begins to raise questions about, the more we change, the more we seem to back to the beginning. So let me leave you with the quote from the preamble of the Constitution, which says, and I quote, that since wars begin in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men and women that the defenses of peace may be constructed, unquote. I think that is very relevant to our situation in Sierra Leone. We've come out of a 2-decade-old conflict. We're almost 2 decades into the post-conflict phase. We have achieved quite a lot along the way, but we still have a lot of challenges. And part of those challenges have to do with our own responsibility as citizens and how we define those responsibilities vis-a-vis the states. So with that, I want to thank all our panelists very much for a very exciting discussion this evening. And I want to thank the organizers, Grant, for giving me the opportunity to moderate this. I hope that we'll have subsequent sessions that we focus on some of the specific issues as we go along. So thank you very much, and I hand you over to Mr. Bob Amma.
I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Leone, and I'm happy he
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry for coming in late. I was only briefed on my connectivity details.
No, it's all right. It's all right, Mr. Masako. But Mr. Dr. Leone has just walked right into my trap by saying that there's a need for subsequent conversations. So I just want to thank Dr. Leone for taking time, and this is what we're all talking about: civil responsibility, civic responsibility. This is a busy man who to be honest, to give his 2 hours on a Sunday where he should be resting. These are the kind of role models. Somebody spoke about role models. I think it was Mr. Masako or Safiatu. And this is what we're saying Sierra Leone needs. So I'm very grateful, sir, Koto. But now you've walked into the real trap now, because you have to take this conversation to the next level. Yeah, you've just walked into that, and I'm grateful to God, and I'm thankful that, because that's one of the things that came up, that we need role models, we need empathy, we need structures, we need people to be able to be honest and apologize. We need oneness, we need pledge, the explanation of the pledge of Sierra Leone, because some people they teach the kids in school the pledge, but there's no explanation of the context of the pledge. Civics from the start, from women being part of the solution. These are the little things I picked up from the conversation. Youth service, a must, women representation, build a national psyche, politicizing the police. So at the end of the day, I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Lamy, for moderating, for your precious time. We're not taking it for granted at Grand Radio and Community Matters, but also for all the panelists, because it was a good conversation. I don't know what you guys think, but I think it was a very productive and progressive conversation. However, I think we did not learn. That's the only thing. We did not learn completely. So I think I'm going to appeal to Dr. Lamida. No, this is part one. This is part one. Yeah, unfortunately, my cut also, I have got him. But I think Solinos need to really hear this and hear a lot more of this. So I just want to say to all the panelists, I want to say a big thank you for taking your time out of your precious, issues to come and contribute to the development of Sierra Leone. So what I want to appeal to you is that please be part of this conversation. I want to thank my production manager, Super Leslie Cromer Senior in Texas, Houston. He's been very quiet today for some reason, I don't know, but he's very quiet. But at the same time, I think from what I've heard from the conversation, there's a lot more to be spoken about. And I just want to get your commitment as to whether you're ready to move forward with this conversation. I think I'd like to hear from every individual panelist. Unfortunately, Dr. Inkstein had to leave because she was struggling to come back. But are you willing to be part of this conversation moving forward? I'll go to Sufia to first.
Yeah,
Safia
of
to
course.
first. What
Yeah,
about
of
Mr.
course. We are all part of this grant. We are all part of grant, definitely.
Okay, fantastic. And Mr. Masakoi.
Yeah, certainly. As a man who came in very late for the
Yeah,
discussion,
you owe us. In fact, you owe us.
Yeah, you need to make up for lost time.
Yeah, you owe us. Exactly.
I will cherish another opportunity at actually expounding on some of the issues that have already been discussed, and I will definitely relish that, a second bite of the cherry.
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Freeman, Dr. Freeman.
Buze.
I didn't tell you this guy that never stops something. Dr. Freeman, how about you, sir?
Well, we've been dragged here today, and it's all about civic responsibility. So there could be no better way of exercising our civic responsibility than showing that commitment to a cause that is that at least want to help to lift the status of our people in our country.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so once again, I want to say a big thank you to Dr. Abdul Rahman Amin. He's a busy man. To get him to do something like this, I'm telling you, nobody will understand. He works for UNESCO. He's a busy man, and this is what I'm saying about civil civic responsibility, chose to say, you know what?
We cannot be big for Sierra Leone.
No, but I have to say it. I have to say it. So I'm so grateful, my Koto, and please, I would be grateful if you could also commit to take this to the next level. Yeah. Yeah, but so thank you so much, everyone, for everything. There are a lot of points. I'm sure the moderator took points. I'm sure we've all taken points that we could go think about. And then when we come for the next conversation, we could analyze.
I think there are a lot of takeaways.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of takeaways, but we need to crystallize these thoughts, right? We need to really crystallize them in order to
actually.
Yeah. In a very, sir, moderator and organizer, can we be able to have access to the recording if possible later on? Is that something you hope to share out?
Yeah, is that who's speaking? Is it Dr. Freeman now?
Yeah, that's Dr. Freeman.
Yeah. That's where our production manager and chair of this radio program, Leslie Kuruma, that's where he makes it possible.
Can we hear from Leslie?
Leslie, come on, say something. Yeah.
He's done a lot of good stuff behind the scenes.
Thank you guys, and we appreciate you all coming on. And definitely, there was a little bit of technical issues when we started, but I appreciated the expression of patience by everyone, and I just want to thank you all, definitely. And yes, the answer to your question, Dr. Freeman, is yes, a copy of the recording will be available.
Unless you've gone quiet again. Anyway.
Yeah.
What we'll do.
Yeah, so sorry about that. So sorry about that. It's been like that all day for me. I don't know why. We're having a lot, everybody's on me in America in there because of the COVID-19. So we're having a lot of bandwidth issues. So that's a problem. So, but yeah, thank you all. And the recording will be available for you, Dr. Freeman, and everybody else. So it'll be out there. So thank you, and God bless you all.
Yeah,
God bless you.
All right, take care. So have a nice
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Freeman.
Yes, bye. How did you long time, I tell you, long time.
I know.
Long time.
Yes,
Very good.